walk you through everything I did to troubleshoot this window. If you have a second gen CRV window that doesn't work, I'm going to take you through every possible failure point. You're going to need a voltmeter for sure to diagnose if it's something electrical. Then a small flathead, Phillips, and potentially a putty knife. Easiest place to start over here at the fuse box before tearing your door apart. And you'll notice you have 22 through 25 are your window fuses. Set your voltmeter in continuity mode with the beeper on, and then you can get up in there. Probably can't see this, but you'll grab that fuse in question once you got your two leads on it. Verify that you have continuity across your fuse. Now what I also like to do over here while I'm at the fuse box is put it into voltage mode, and I have the ground wire just connected to somewhere on the frame. I have it on a screw at the moment. And then also come up in here, grab your fuse in question, and make sure that you have 12 volts coming to that fuse. Now if it failed either one of those checks, hopefully it's just that fuse. Replace that fuse. If the fuse test the window, if the fuse instantly blows again, that means you have something downstream. Maybe your motor's shorted out, that's instantly causing that fuse to blow, or just an old motor drawing too much amperage. So the next thing you're gonna have to do though is take your door apart, unfortunately. I already have the door apart on the one that has the issue, but I'll show you quickly on this one. This pops up. Just get something underneath here and carefully pry that up, pop it out, pop the clip out the back, as you can see on that one down there. This, you'll pop out this little door panel, 2 screws, that pops out, this pulls out. You'll have to unattach that door handle. There's a little metal thing holding onto that. Under here you have 1 screw there and 1 screw there. Pop those 2 out. After that, just give the door a good pull to pop out all the clips. There's 1 clip here, and you'll have to take this off as well. And then the door kind of lifts up and off. So kind of what that looks like. This plug will unplug from this thing, and you'll pull that out of the way. Here's your doorknob. You'll pop out this little metal piece here. That kind of just, you gotta pop it forward to pop it out of this little plastic piece here, and then pop it up. Now that we're over here, you're gonna want to do a couple things. First, all right, so ignore this wire. This ended up being my issue here, but let's just pretend like that's in there. So the first thing you're going to want to do is unplug this cable here. This is what's going to your power window. And now we are going to want to check the voltage across that. All right, to make this a bit easier to see, you'll notice I've got a couple leads placed in there and some alligator clips over the voltmeter. So what should happen is, as you press the up button, let's just say like this one's positive, this one's negative, and then when you press down it just swaps the polarity where this one's positive, this one's negative. So ideally on your voltmeter you should pull up and see, in this case shows negative 12 volts, but that's fine. And then when I press it the other direction, I should see that flip-flop. So now it should say positive 12 volts for the down direction. And as you can see, it's my down that is broken, my up appears to work. But since I'm stuck in the up position, of course the window is not going to move up any further. So that already tells me kind of where my problem is. There's an issue with the down. Now, if you get no voltage on this, it could be your switch here. So there's a couple things I would do to test that. I would pull the switch off of, for example, your back door, which was one of the first things I did, and just like, or whatever door you know that works, and swap another switch in here. just as a real quick test. If that doesn't work, well, I'm going to move on to the next test here. Alright, so I went ahead and unplugged this plug here. And the way this works is you have 12 volts here, then you have one of your wires that goes to the window, and you can tell which one that goes to just by looking at the coloring. So this one is red with a blue stripe. That is directly connected to this one here. So you have 12 volts, one of your window lines, then you have a ground, then your other window line, and then another ground. So what you want to do here is first you want to start just by seeing if you have 12 volts coming in here. Alright, so I have my lead plugged into this green wire, which should be our 12 volts coming in. Then I just have it grounded off to the frame over here. Now as you can see, we have 12 volts. So we have voltage coming in. The next test we're going to do is make sure we have our two grounds are actually grounded. So I'm going to switch the voltmeter to continuity mode, and I have that still grounded over here, so when I touch, we get a beep. And this is where my problem is, which is kind of an interesting problem. But as I sit here and check my two blues for ground, you can see that one's grounded, and that center one is for the window going up. The other one, though, is not grounded, and that's for the window going down. So somewhere, this leading back through the harness, we have lost a ground connection. Now, one case I didn't cover here, let's say you have voltage, your voltage looks fine coming out of this. When you press up, it is 12 volts, and when you press down, it's negative 12 volts, or vice versa, depending how you hooked up the voltmeter. In that scenario, it's probably your motor. What I would do then is try to find a way to safely connect 12 volts directly to this. So I have a spare small battery I'll pull out here and set down, and then just do 2 wire leads carefully to those two, making sure not to short anything, short the battery, and that way you can test your motor. So if your voltage is properly coming out of here, then it's something with your motor. In my case, it's this weird grounding issue, and to prove this, I'll show you what I did to fix that. Technically, these two are connected when the switch is in the middle position, and these two are connected when the switch is like in its resting state. So all 4 of these should be reading as tied to ground with a continuity check. What's interesting is we know this one to be the problematic wire on this side. It's not tied to ground. But what I'm curious is, I'm wondering if it's an issue with one of the circuits over on this side, because with that one unplugged, you would still expect the window to go up, and it does nothing. Whereas this works perfectly fine in the up direction, since I don't have this grounded at the moment. So let's do some further investigating of the driver's side switch circuit. I think it may be beneficial to walk through this overly simplified circuit real quick. So let's assume that this area over here represents the driver's switch for that window, and this area in the center represents the passenger side switch. Now, this whole area is that connector with the 2 red wires and 2 blue wires. When it's plugged into the switch by default just bridges the blue to red and the secondary blue to red, the ones with the stripes, to the window motor. So from the driver's side switch, by default, those are tied to ground, and in its resting state, all 4 of those pins should all just be tied directly to ground. So again, you have pin like 1, 2, 3, 4 here. When you plug that voltmeter in on continuity mode, all of these should be tied to ground with the connector plugged in. So what happens is, when you press the switch either up or down, let's just say we're looking at the passenger switch. When you press the switch up, it then will bridge 12 volts over here. This connection is broken, bridged here, and then this is still tied to ground back at the driver's switch, or it's supposed to be at least, and you'll see that this ends up being my problem. Then when you reverse the direction, we tie that one into 12 volts. This one is by default bridged through, and then we have the window motor reverse directions. And then again, looking at the driver's side switch, the exact same behavior occurs. In one direction, we connect 12 volts here. These are connected by default. And we get one direction, and then the same thing, vice versa in the other direction. So you'll notice the switch is bridging, the passenger switch is bridging these connections by default. So if you were to unplug the passenger switch, well, these connections are getting bridged and the driver's side switch will not work. Alternatively, if you unplug the driver's switch, even though we're applying 12 volts here, we don't have a connection to ground. So again, the switch will not work. So oftentimes, you have to have both switches working for those windows to work at all, and it could be either one of these switches, as I've found out. So hopefully this kind of explains the next sections of this video a bit better. So a few things to note. With the driver's side circuit unplugged, your windows will not operate. And that's because I believe the circuits start kind of at the driver's side, come here, or route it over to the individual windows, and then these don't work. And the same thing is if you unplug this circuit, the driver's side panel will not control this window. And I believe that's because you have your first pair and second pair tied when this is in resting state. And it uses that. Now let's investigate these switches further. Alright, so I have our switches pulled out of our cover here. So it's pretty much a few screws, 3 screws holding it onto this panel, and then 3 screws holding on the back plate. And then the back plate has a couple tabs, which I used a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry those. And I believe I may see the culprit here. So we have 4 pads. So 1, 2, 3, 4 per switch. And so 4 here, 4 here. Then we have, this is our driver's side, has more because it has those auto functions. And the window that we're having an issue with, you can see, this camera will focus. You can see we have some interesting behavior there. So I went ahead and probed this out. And the way this works is this last pin is our ground plane. And you can kind of see that because usually the ground plane is the largest plane on the circuit board, and we are just tied in directly to this very large plane. So we have our ground plane here, and in its resting state, those tie these two together, and it ties this one and this last one up here together. Then in our window down state, I don't recall exactly the ordering here, but let's just say then this pin is tied to ground, and this pin then gets tied to this, which I'm going to assume this is our 12 volts. So we'll have these two grounded, these two connected as 12 volts. Then when you switch the other way, you then have this one grounded to this one, and these two connected. So that's the flip-flop there. So what I'm going to guess is that one of these pins, presumably this one, is no longer grounded to our ground plane. So that is the final verdict. It appears that there's nothing wrong with the window motor, nothing wrong with the switch. it is actually over on this side. This circuit is not connecting this pin to ground because of these pads right here. I think I'm going to run to our local junkyard, see if they have a replacement one of these. Donor car. So I got this apart, and you can see it looks like this switch is toast. Now, if I had to guess, I would say maybe this internally shorted and generated enough heat to melt itself and therefore break. I'm surprised a fuse didn't blow before that happened, but I guess maybe it didn't quite pull 20 amps. But the new one is installed. Doors all back together and functioning as expected. Unfortunately, on this new switch, my auto feature has broken, but I know there is a reset procedure. You're supposed to hold it down for, at the bottom, I think for 3 seconds, or maybe it's the top. Kind of tried that, didn't work, but that is going to be a problem for another day. All right, goodbye.